At my mother-in-law's birthday dinner, she stood up, raised her wine glass, and smiled like she was about to make a sweet toast. Then she said, clear as day, "Some people here don't belong in this family." Every fork stopped. Every chair went still. Everyone turned to me. My stomach tightened. I looked at my husband. He didn't meet my eyes. He reached for his glass and took a slow sip, like he hadn't heard her at all. I didn't say a word. I felt my son's hand slip away from mine. He stood up from the table, pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, and held it out in front of everyone. "She asked me to hide this," he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "But I think you should read it." Judith, my mother-in-law, went pale. Her smile dropped, like someone had yanked the string holding it up. For once, she didn't have a single word to say. That was the moment everything changed. But to understand how we got there, you need to know what happened before the toast, before my son made a choice that none of the adults at that table had the courage to make. Let me take you back. My name is Callie Monroe. I'm 38, a middle school teacher, a wife, and a mom of two. And for most of my marriage, I've been trying to earn a place in a family that never wanted me. When I first met Evan, my husband, he warned me his mother was old-fashioned. I assumed that meant she liked baking pies and watching reruns of black and white movies. I didn't realize it meant she believed her son should have married someone wealthier, whiter, quieter, and more submissive. Someone like Lena. Lena was Evan's high school sweetheart. His mother, Judith, adored her. She still brings her up like a fond memory, like a prize Evan dropped. I never met Lena in person, but her name was always floating in the background. When Evan and I got engaged, Judith didn't congratulate us. She said, "I thought he might come to his senses." That was my welcome into the Monroe family. For 10 years, I've smiled through every micro-cut she's thrown my way. My lasagna was too spicy. The Christmas pajamas I bought for the kids were tacky. The birthday gift I gave her 1 year was still in the wrapping the next time I visited. I'd watch her praise Evan's sister Renee for making boxed brownies but turn around and critique my homemade ones. I convinced myself that if I kept showing up, kept helping, kept saying yes, one day she'd finally accept me. Evan didn't want to see it. Or maybe he did, but he didn't want to confront her. Anytime I brought it up, he would say, "You know how she is," or "She doesn't mean anything by it." So I stopped complaining. I just worked harder. I ironed the napkins before we visited. I made sure our kids were dressed like little catalog models. I baked from scratch. I smiled until my face hurt. I made myself smaller in hopes that maybe Judith would find less of me to disapprove of. Then came the birthday dinner. Judith was turning 65, and she insisted on throwing a formal dinner at her house with the whole family. She asked me to help coordinate the meal. I spent 3 days preparing her favorite lemon herb chicken and a triple-layer chocolate cake from a recipe passed down in my family. Evan didn't say much. He assumed it would go like every other family event: awkward smiles, backhanded compliments, and the usual invisible wall between Judith and me. That night, I wore a navy dress that Judith had once complimented. I made sure my hair was smooth, my makeup soft, and my shoes matched the table decor she'd chosen. Toby, our 12-year-old son, wore a button-up and slacks without complaint. Maya, our daughter, had a little bow in her hair. We arrived 15 minutes early, as Judith had requested. She greeted Evan and the kids with hugs. I got a nod. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine. Silver chargers, linen napkins, wine glasses already filled. Judith had printed place cards with everyone's names. Evan and I weren't seated next to each other. I was across from him, beside Judith. That wasn't an accident. As the meal started, the conversation flowed around me. Judith asked Renee about her new interior design clients. She praised Evan's younger brother, Marcus, for buying a new car. She told Maya how pretty she looked. She didn't ask me a single question. I kept smiling, kept passing dishes, kept telling myself to keep the peace. But my son saw everything. Toby's eyes kept flicking to me, watching how I shrank a little more every time Judith ignored me or cut me off. At one point, he reached under the table and squeezed my hand. That was the first moment I felt like someone in the room really saw me. I tried to focus on the kids, on the food, on making it to the end of the night without another wound. But somewhere deep down, I could feel something shifting. That night wasn't going to end like the others. Something about the way Judith kept glancing at her watch, the way Evan avoided my eyes, the way Toby kept fidgeting in his seat. It all felt wrong. And then Judith stood up. She held her glass high and smiled. That's when the real story began. Dinner was almost over. The plates were mostly cleared and the second bottle of wine had made its rounds. Conversation had quieted, replaced by the soft clinking of silverware and the occasional polite laugh. Judith sat at the head of the table, surveying everything like she was queen of her little kingdom. She had that calm, smug look she wore when she thought things were going exactly her way. I was halfway through a quiet conversation with Maya about school when Judith suddenly stood up. She tapped her knife gently against her glass, and everyone turned to her. "I just want to say a few words," she said, raising her glass. She smiled sweetly, but there was something in her eyes. I saw it the moment she glanced at me. This wasn't a toast about her birthday. It was a performance, and I was the target. "I look around this table," she began, "and I see my family, my blood, my people, the ones who've always been there, the ones who know what it means to carry the Monroe name." I stiffened. Evan kept his head down, swirling his wine as if it had answers at the bottom of the glass. Judith continued, "Some of us have shared years of memories, laughs, tears, stories we still bring up at holidays, and some of us are new, newer than others, trying to fit in." The smile never left her face. Her tone stayed warm, but the air went cold. "Still," she said, looking straight at me, "some people here don't belong in this family." Her words hit like a slap. A few people chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke, but no one really laughed, because everyone knew who she meant. All eyes shifted to me. My fork froze midair. I looked across the table, hoping Evan would jump in, that he would say something, anything, to shut this down. He didn't. He looked down and sipped his wine. I felt my throat tighten, but I held myself still. I had spent years building up walls for moments like this. I had learned how to take it, how to breathe through it, how to pretend I was unaffected. But this time felt different. My kids were watching. I glanced at Toby. He looked confused, then angry. He shifted in his chair, his jaw clenched. I could see something working in his mind, something quick and urgent. Maya reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed it gently, hoping to keep her calm, even as my own heart started racing. Judith raised her glass a little higher. "To those who belong," she said, "and to those trying their best to catch up." The toast ended. A few scattered clinks. No one said a word. No one smiled. The silence was louder than any argument. I stared at my plate. I could feel my face burning, not from shame, but from rage I had swallowed for too long. I opened my mouth to speak, but Toby beat me to it. He stood up. The room shifted. Chairs creaked as heads turned. He reached into the pocket of his blazer and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He held it up, not saying anything at first. Judith's eyes locked on it. Her face tightened. For the first time all night, she looked nervous. Toby's voice was steady. "She asked me to hide this," he said, "but I think you should read it." The words dropped like a stone. Judith's hand reached toward him. "Toby, sweetheart, that's nothing. Just something silly. Give it to me." Toby stepped back, out of her reach. "You told me not to show it to Mom, but I think she needs to see it." I sat up straighter. "Toby, what is that?" He walked around the table and handed it to me. It was folded neatly like someone had taken their time with it. The outside was blank, but the paper was thick. High quality. Not from a child's notebook. Judith was pale now. Her eyes flicked between me and the letter. I unfolded it slowly. Inside was a printed email. The subject line read, "Evan and Lena, still hope?" My fingers went numb. I began to read the first line. "I know you still care about her. She was always the right one. I just want you to be happy, Evan." The room was silent. No one breathed. The letter was from Judith. It was addressed to Evan's ex, Lena. I kept reading. I didn't rush. I wanted every word to be heard. "I've invited you to the dinner. No one has to know. Just stop by, say hello. It might remind him what he's missing." When I looked up, Judith's expression was blank. Not sorry, not surprised, just caught. I turned to Evan. "Did you know about this?" He didn't speak. His face went white. Renee, Evan's sister, leaned forward. "Mom, are you serious? You invited Lena? Judith said nothing. Her glass was still raised, but her hand was trembling. I looked around the table at the people who had sat in silence as Judith humiliated me. No one was laughing now. This wasn't just about family politics anymore. It was betrayal, and it wasn't mine to carry alone anymore. That night, the truth cracked open. The damage was done. The room felt frozen. Judith's toast still hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. But now everyone's attention was on the paper in my hands, the letter she had told my son to keep secret. My son, a 12-year-old boy who had been caught in the crossfire of adult cruelty. A child who saw enough to know that hiding this wasn't right. My heart broke and swelled at the same time. I looked at him, standing there, with his shoulders square and his chin high. He had done something most grown men at that table wouldn't have had the courage to do. I turned my attention to Evan. He was staring at his plate. I waited for him to say something, to explain, to defend me, to deny it, anything. He didn't move. So I spoke. I want everyone to hear this, I said. My voice didn't shake. This email was written by Judith. Talina gasps spread through the table. My sister-in-law Renee looked between her mother and brother, waiting for someone to say it wasn't true. No one did. I read it aloud, every line. I made sure not to soften it, not to protect Judith from her own words. I know you still care about her. She was always the right one. She fits in better. Just stop by the dinner, a quick visit. Maybe it will remind Evan what he's missing. When I finished, I placed the paper flat on the table and looked at Evan. Did you know about this? I asked. He finally lifted his eyes to meet mine. His mouth opened, then closed. He shook his head. No, he said quietly. I didn't. I swear I didn't. His voice cracked. I didn't know she sent that. I would never... But he didn't finish the sentence. He couldn't. Judith spoke up then, her voice sharp and cold. I was trying to help him. He's been unhappy for years. I see it. Everyone sees it. No, I said. You see what you want to see. You've never seen me. You've never even tried. Judith stood straighter. You never belonged in this family. That should have crushed me. 10 years ago, it might have. But right then, in that moment, something inside me clicked into place. I know, I said, because I spent a decade trying to earn a seat at this table. I showed up. I brought food. I brought your grandchildren. I smiled when you ignored me, and I stayed silent when you insulted me. Not anymore. I turned to Toby, who was still standing, still watching everything like he didn't want to miss what happened next. Thank you, I told him, for being honest, for being brave. He gave a small nod, and I saw relief flood his face. Maya was watching too, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. Her eyes were wide but calm, like she had been waiting to see what I would do. Evan stood up slowly. Mom, he said, this isn't helping anyone. You crossed a line. You lied. You brought another woman into this house behind my wife's back? Judith looked stunned. I was trying to fix your life. My life doesn't need fixing, he said. My marriage does, and it starts with me being honest. I've been avoiding conflict for years, with you, with Callie, even with myself. I thought if I ignored the tension, it would fade, but it didn't. It got worse. He looked at me again. Callie, I didn't stand up for you. Not tonight, not before. I thought staying out of it was neutral, but it wasn't. It was a choice, and it hurt you. I'm sorry. His voice broke on the last word. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and sincere. I'm sorry, he said again. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to decide what came next, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to keep shrinking to make space for someone else's bitterness. Judith sat down. She didn't speak again. She looked at the table, then at the floor, her expression blank and unreadable. No one picked up their glasses. No one toasted. The birthday dinner was over, not with cake or laughter, but with truth. And in that moment, the silence felt like a beginning. The room was so quiet I could hear the slow ticking of the clock in the hallway. Everyone sat frozen. The letter lay in the center of the table, like it had sucked the air out of the room. Judith was still in her chair, her expression hollow, her eyes darting between faces, searching for someone to take her side. No one did. Toby had returned to his seat beside me. Maya leaned her head gently against my arm. The kids didn't speak, but they didn't look afraid. They looked steady, steadier than the adults. I took a breath. I wasn't going to make a scene, but I wasn't going to be silent anymore either. I turned to Evan. "You let her do this," I said. "Even if you didn't know about the email, you've been letting her push me out of your life for years. You said nothing while she insulted me. You laughed when she mocked my job. You told me to let it go, over and over. You let her tell me I didn't belong." "I know," Evan said. His voice wasn't defensive anymore. It was tired, honest, and I told myself I was keeping the peace, but I wasn't. I was just choosing the easier side. Judith sat up straighter. "So now you're turning on me, your own mother." "I'm not turning on you," Evan said. "I'm facing you. You've been trying to replace my wife with someone else for 10 years. You've never accepted her. Not because she did anything wrong, but because you never wanted to let go of the idea that I should have married Lena." Judith's mouth tightened, but she didn't argue. "You keep calling it love," Evan continued. "But love isn't controlling. It isn't manipulative. You went behind our backs, tried to bring another woman into our home, into this dinner, and for what? To humiliate my wife in front of my kids? In front of my siblings? That's not love, that's sabotage." He looked around the table, then back at me. "I don't want this to be our life anymore," he said. "I don't want our kids to think this is normal. I want them to know what it looks like when you take responsibility. I'm late, but I'm here now, and I'm choosing you." I looked at him and saw something shift. For years, I had felt alone in that family. Even standing beside Evan, I often felt like I was on my own. But now he wasn't just standing there. He was standing with me. Judith shook her head. "She's turning you against me." "No," Evan said firmly. "You did that all by yourself." Renee finally spoke. "Mom, I don't even know who you are right now. You've always been hard on Callie, but this was deliberate. You crossed every line." Marcus nodded beside her. "You always say family is everything, but then you try to rip it apart when it doesn't look exactly how you want." Judith looked stunned. She had expected loyalty. She thought she could manipulate everyone into staying silent. But something had shifted at that table, and it wasn't going back. She pushed back from her chair, stood up, and said quietly, "I think we're done here." She didn't wait for anyone to respond. She walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking against the floor, and disappeared down the hall. No one followed her. I stood slowly. My hands were still shaking, not from fear anymore, but from adrenaline, from release, from finally saying the things I had swallowed for too long. I looked down at Toby. "You okay?" He nodded. "I didn't want to keep it from you." "I know," I said. "You did the right thing." "Thank you." Renee stood and began gathering dishes without a word. Marcus and his wife helped quietly, as if trying to soften the weight that still hung in the air. Evan reached for my hand and held it firmly. We didn't eat dessert. No one touched the cake I had spent hours baking, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like a guest at my own table, and I wasn't going to feel that way again. That night didn't end in celebration. It ended in truth, and that was enough. After Judith walked out, the house felt hollow. We stood in the silence she left behind, unsure whether to pretend the night was still normal or to admit that something had finally broken. Evan and I helped the kids gather their things. I thanked Renee quietly for her support, and she nodded without saying much. There was a heaviness in the room, but also a kind of relief. The pretending was over. As we drove home, Toby stared out the window. Maya had fallen asleep in the back seat with her head resting on her brother's shoulder. Evan kept glancing at me, but I didn't speak. I needed time, and he gave it to me. That night, after the kids were in bed, Evan sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked smaller somehow. Not weaker, just stripped down. No mask, no excuses. "I should have stood up to her years ago," he said. I didn't argue. He was right. "I was afraid of disappointing her," he continued, "but in doing that, I disappointed you." "You didn't just disappoint me," I said. "You left me alone. Over and over." "I know," he said, "and I hate that it took our son being braver than me for me to finally see it." I looked at him for a long time. We weren't healed, not yet, But something had cracked open that night, and in that space, something honest had finally taken root. "We need counseling," I said. "Not just for us, for the kids, too." "I'll schedule it," he said without hesitation. In the days that followed, Judith didn't call. She didn't apologize. She didn't check in with her grandchildren. That silence used to terrify me. Now it just confirmed what I already knew. She was never going to change. But I could. I stopped apologizing for things I never did wrong. I stopped bending over backward to prove myself to someone who had already made up her mind. I stopped tiptoeing through my own life. Evan kept his promise. We started therapy. It was hard, painful, uncomfortable, but we showed up, together. He started unpacking years of guilt and emotional avoidance. I started releasing the shame I had carried in silence. We began to rebuild, not the marriage we had, but something better, something rooted in honesty. One evening, a few weeks later, I was baking with the kids. Maya was frosting cupcakes while Toby tried to mix batter one-handed, clearly showing off. I was laughing, really laughing, when he looked at me and said, "You know, you don't need to be a Monroe. You're already the best one in this family." I didn't cry, but my hands froze for a second. That one sentence meant more than any approval I had ever begged for. "You're the reason we're okay," he added. "You keep everything together." I kissed his forehead and kept mixing. I didn't need Judith's validation anymore. I had the truth. I had the trust of my kids. I had a husband who was finally willing to grow, and I had myself. That dinner was never about a toast or a birthday. It was a mirror. It showed us what had been broken and forced us to decide whether we were willing to keep pretending or if we were brave enough to start again. I chose the latter. I chose me, and I've never looked back. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own strength in the face of silence, I hope you'll take a second to let me know. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment. I read everyone, and I'd love to hear your thoughts or stories. And if you want more real, raw, and honest storytelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here. Your time, your support, and your voice matter. Until next time, take care of yourself and never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong.